Zach Wyner is an Oakland-based author whose debut novel, What We Never Had, has been published by Rare Bird Books.
We tend to look back, especially on our mid-20s, early to mid-20s, that period of our lives with some embarrassment sometimes. It tends to be a messy period, or can be, or for maybe that was personal, maybe it was for me, but I feel like many other people I know also struggled during that period. And there's a desire maybe to distance yourself a little bit from your actions, so that instead of changing it, instead of writing in the first person I, that you gives it a little distance. So we talk about ourselves and that period in the second person, because it's almost as if it was a different person doing that. But at the same time, that particular age, I think we're very vulnerable at that time, and I think that there's a desire in looking back and wanting to, admonish at times, but also let's praise as well, and let's look at the positives, the good things that you did, or the good people you were surrounded by, or the good choices you made. Some of the action is pretty close to lived experience, really just in the beginning of the book, and I thought I'd write it as a short story. And it was just a story an anecdote that I told that would always get a big response. And I said, okay, I'll just write this one about myself. And I ended up wanting to spend a lot more time with the characters. And I don't even think it came out as a short story. The pacing was all wrong. It needed a lot of room to breathe. And I wanted to spend more time with some of those guys, and then it all just spun off into fantasy. It was a direction that, I was like, this would be interesting if this had happened at that point.
Can you speak about the many worlds Josh is caught between and how and where they overlap?
Right. I think, again, that's one of the reasons for the choice of that period in one's life, is we find ourselves tugged before careers have taken hold, or before family is everything that we're about. So I think I chose some specific settings that would evoke those different worlds. The apartment itself, the small studio or junior one bedroom that he lives in is a nexus really for where the unemployed and the employed meet. It's his buddies who are sort of resolutely unemployed at this point. They know that they're going to have to get jobs in order to live in Los Angeles, and they might have some guilt about crashing in Josh's apartment, but they're not so thrilled about entering the working world. And Josh, when he enters that space, he wants to enjoy it the way that they enjoy it. So that might mean engaging in some of the same activities, and that might mean drinking on a Wednesday night. It might mean wasting hours in front of the television. Not that working people don't do that, but doing it in a way that's reminiscent more of how his life would have been on a summer vacation or something like that, rather than as an adult who's joined the workforce.
Sort of sustained adolescence?
Absolutely. But yeah, and with a little more awareness, less green, and some jadedness to it. So a darker place, maybe. Well, adolescence can be pretty dark. But less melodrama, more maybe real drama that's happened.
There are references to sports throughout the story. How does sports serve as a sort of glue that holds together this narrative, and how do politics serve the same purpose?
For these characters at that point in their lives, sports play out in real time. So it's not just a book that you love or something, or a piece of art that you can identify with. It's it's players onto whom maybe you project your own hopes and dreams, and then you don't know what's going to happen with them. You don't know if they're going to succeed or fail, and you live those much more personally, those successes and those failures, than I think you do at any other time in your life. I think when you have kids or something of your own, or you have a career that you're really involved in, you can still really be into your team, but it doesn't quite, it's not as personal. Okay, so, and then politics. Politics are, for certain characters in this, politics are the justification, because it's so bleak at the time. It's 2003, it's the Iraq War, George Bush is president, so politics are a space where you can vent any of your own frustrations that you might have with your own life, certainly with the society that you've been primed to enter your whole life. The character of Amari, it's not even really alluded to in the book, but in my mind he was someone who participated in the February 15th protests of 2003, like the largest joint protest that happened across the world in history. And I think a lot of young people felt like that was going to change something, like they had a real chance to change something, and it didn't. So that was very disheartening, and I think it was in the mood of the depression that followed, seeing the rabbit hole of warmongering and Islamophobia and nationalism and militarism that the country was going down. That was part of the depression into which these characters sank, and what pushed them to kind of try and find something new, at least in a warmer climate.
There isn't much backstory in this narrative. Was this winnowed out in earlier drafts?
Yeah, the backstory was written at times. I had whole chunks and scenes and flashbacks, and I usually when I draft a novel, which I've only actually done a couple times, but, so not usually, but I found that the best way to do it was to produce this rough draft and then fatten it up a lot with backstory, and then trim it down again and just get what was essential in there. And I think because the story takes place over such a brief window of time, it's only like a month that the whole story spans, I decided I didn't really want much at all. I thought that the reader might become detached from the action if I went too far back, or if I ventured back too many times. I had to stick with the story, and I prefer to the old axiom, show don't tell. I wanted people to be able to imagine what these characters had gone through accurately enough, just by showing how they, through gesture or through dialogue, how they are in the world. I don't think that their histories were too hazy. I think, and again, it comes back to the second person thing. I want people to be able to identify. So when you get too specific about someone's history, you're going to make that a little more challenging.
The story has some violence, and June is at the center of a lot of it. Is June a kind of 21st century femme fatale, or is she just an attractive girl with an abusive ex and some mental health challenges?
June is in a way, she resembles a femme fatale in her entrance to the story. She comes in and she doesn't appear until maybe a third of the way into the novel, but she's left a phone message that's rather ominous. She's told, we know that she said if Josh doesn't rescue her and take her in, that she's going to be turning tricks on Santa Monica Boulevard. And we know that she's been abused, that she's that she's been had a domestic violence situation. So we know that while she's not the cause of the violence, that violence is following her, and there are allusions to a rough breakup between Josh and June. So we can recognize that she maybe brings a storm with her, that she's sort of at the center of a larger storm that leaves, possibly has left some wreckage around the San Fernando Valley, or or Hollywood. But she's not a two-dimensional character. She shows up, and she's much more than that. She has a lot of depth to her. Yes, she has some mental health issues, but she's also got some real backbone, and she has character, and some of that has been forged in the crucible of her childhood situations that she lived, that Josh, the main protagonist, never. He lived in a far more sheltered, nurturing, caring environment. So in some ways, she's a lot tougher than he is, and more willing to sacrifice herself rather than take somebody down with her.
What about Bill and Amari? They clearly offer some comic relief, but they also push Josh in ways he needs to be pushed. They're shiftless, but they are consistently principled people. What do they reveal about ambition and morality?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay. So they're pretty different characters. They're a duo for sure, and they kind of balance each other out. But they certainly they are kind of in a way they're like Josh's moral compass while they're in his space. Reminding him maybe of some of the principles that he's already maybe started to bend a little bit with, the ones that you have that are maybe typical of youth, but that we struggle to sustain. They are not ambitious, and Bill isn't an ambitious character like that. That is pretty clear. He's funny, and he's self-deprecating, and he's kind and empathic, but he doesn't have real designs on his future other than maybe just working, and maybe that'll be enough, and having good friends. And in this world, certainly in Josh's world, that's makes him an anomaly. Amari maybe more cynical, but we can see where there's some more passion, and like a fire that won't be sad. It's going to burn, and it's going to push him to do something other than just sit on the couch and rail against the problems in the world that he sees. But they become real important to Josh in that small period of time that they're staying in his apartment. They're voices that he needs to hear as he's transitioning, and he might also serve as a positive influence on them. Josh certainly, while he likes to point to some of his shortcomings, maybe giving up on acting or something like that, he is driven, and he is in the working world, and he seems to be doing relatively well, and he has a good attitude, and he's working with kids. All these things are I think Amari and Bill might. I think it benefits them to be around him as well.
Are these characters going to be okay?
Yeah, I think they are. Not always. I think they're going to have dark periods. and I think it's going to take a while for some of them to find their place, to find their footing, and that's just going to have to be okay. You know, it's not the story. The story doesn't end in a way where we can answer that with any certainty. But having spent enough time with the characters, I would understand concern about them at the time, and I would also, I think that by the end of the story, they're in better places than when they started, and that ultimately shows us that that they're fully capable of taking care of themselves and making a positive impact, and they know how to be good friends to one another. And if you can do that, if you can be a good friend, you're gonna be okay.
You're a new father.
Yes.
How is that working out with your new inspirations or maybe next projects?
I mean, it's been a pretty magical time. It was. I waited. I'm a stepdad as well, but I waited to have my own kid, knowing my whole life that how much I loved kids, and I worked with kids for years, and I could have done this sooner, I think, had I found the right person. I just I was worried. I was worried that it would become so consuming that my own ambitions would take a back seat, and yeah, I guess that was kind of a nerve-wracking for somebody who wants to create, and I know how much time and energy that takes. The thought of a child was also like, well, I'll never get anything done, and maybe I won't even care.
Does it help to be married to somebody else who's also a writer and an educator?
Yeah, it helps. It helps. We can. It helps in a number of ways. It helps to see, because she's a great editor, so that's a very practical way that it helps. It helps because she thinks a lot about things and wants to discuss them and solve problems, and that helps keep the synapses firing. And she also has the same doubts, and that really helps as well. I don't know, in the same way that listening to Morrissey might help a teenager or something like that. You want to see the darkness somewhere in somebody else as well, and that's very comforting. I probably should have said The Cure. I never really listened to Morrissey, but some Cure. But yeah, she, that doubt, that being a writer is, it's one of the hardest things to. It was very hard for me. It took a long time before I could say that with a straight face. It sounded arrogant to me. And I couldn't necessarily justify it because I wasn't getting paid to do it most of the time. So I could say that it was a hobby or something, but to identify that way was hard. And it's comforting to see other people who struggle with that, but to me, from the outside, of course, she's a writer. She's a great writer. So, maybe that helped me see to see how she looks at me. Yes, that bolstered me.
What have you planned for your next project?
Next project is a novel that I started working on before Dash was born. I knew that I had to have 30 or 40 pages down, something, so I could just re-enter the story as opposed to trying to begin something new when you're on 4 hours of sleep or whatever. It can be challenging. So the next project is I'm again sort of drawn to people in the beginning stages of adulthood, I might have to linger there for a while longer. And I'm also, I work with incarcerated youth. I've been doing that for a number of years, and the story isn't going to be about an incarcerated youth, but that's finding its way into the work. Maybe it will only have an impact on it the way that politics or sports did on this last novel, but it's going to be something that it's going to be a nexus. It's going to be something that connects people, connects characters. So yeah, I know that much.